You wake up and move through the day as if nothing is wrong. Your body knows the routine. Your voice knows the right tone. You answer when spoken to. You nod when expected. You smile when it is safer than explaining. But inside, something has been carrying weight for a long time. Not the kind of weight that can be named easily. Not a single event. Not a simple wound. It is the accumulation of days where you stayed quiet, of moments where you chose endurance over honesty, of nights where you lay still and tried to understand why your heart felt heavier than your hands. You learned how to survive without asking for help. You learned how to hold pain in places no one sees. You learned how to keep going even when joy stopped visiting you regularly. And people call that strength. But I see more than they do. I see how much effort it takes for you to remain composed. I see how carefully you arrange your words so no one notices the cracks underneath them. I see the thoughts you interrupt before they become tears. You tell yourself it's nothing. You tell yourself others have it worse. You tell yourself to be grateful, to be faithful, to be patient, and still, something in you aches quietly. You are not imagining it. You are not weak for feeling it. You are responding to a life that has asked much of you. Others look at your outward steadiness, but I look at the places where you bend under pressure. Man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. Your heart has been working harder than anyone realizes. There are prayers you never finished speaking because you grew tired of hearing your own voice ask the same things. There are hopes you placed gently to the side, not because you stopped believing, but because hoping began to hurt. Waiting does that. Waiting stretches time until minutes feel heavy. Waiting fills silence with questions. Waiting makes you wonder whether stillness means neglect. And you have waited. You waited for clarity that did not come. You waited for relief that arrived slowly, if at all. You waited while watching others move forward, asking yourself what invisible rule you had failed to follow. You did not stop believing. You simply grew quiet. I noticed the shift. I saw when your prayers became shorter, not because your faith weakened, but because your heart was tired of explaining itself. I saw how you began to carry disappointment with dignity, how you folded it neatly into your days so no one would feel uncomfortable around your pain. But disappointment carried too long begins to press inward. Hope deferred maketh the heart sick. That sickness is not rebellion. It is not a lack of trust. It is the natural response of a heart that has hoped honestly. You are not wrong for feeling worn. You are not failing because you feel unsure. You are not distant from me because you feel tired. I have been closer in these moments than you realize. When you chose to keep going without understanding why, I was there. When you questioned quietly instead of shouting, I was there. When you felt strong on the outside and fragile underneath, I was there. You assumed my presence would feel loud, that it would arrive with certainty and relief, but often I come without noise. I come without urgency. I come without explanations. Not because I am absent, but because some things cannot be built in a rush. You have been forming something within yourself without seeing its shape yet. Patience has been pressing into you. Humility has been softening places you once protected. Depth has been growing where surface answers could not survive. And though it feels like standing still, you have not stopped moving. Even now, as you breathe and listen, as you carry questions you cannot resolve, as you wonder how long this season will last, I am watching the way you hold yourself together and the way you are slowly learning to let go of what you were never meant to carry alone. And there is something unfolding beneath all of this that you do not yet have language for, something that requires time, something that is not ready to be named, something that continues even as you question, even as you wait, even as you sit with the feeling that this moment is unfinished, that the story has not yet reached the place where it makes sense, that you are standing between what was and what will be, holding breath, listening for meaning, unaware that this very pause is where the work is still happening, where the ground is being prepared, where what you think is emptiness is actually the space where something is beginning to take shape, quietly, steadily, without asking your permission, without explaining itself yet, because some things must grow in the dark before they can be recognized. And you are still here, still breathing, still waiting, still walking forward even when the way ahead remains unclear. And that alone is not accidental, not unnoticed, not without purpose, even if right now all you can feel is the weight of continuing without knowing how long this road will stretch or what it is asking of you next, only that you are still being led into something that has not yet revealed itself. You have wondered whether growth is supposed to feel this lonely, whether becoming deeper always requires becoming quieter, whether the path you are on is truly forward or just an endless stretch of endurance disguised as faith. You have looked back sometimes and barely recognize who you were, not because you failed, but because something has been stripped away little by little. Certainty, urgency, the need to be seen. You used to move faster. You used to ask louder questions. You used to believe that answers would arrive quickly if your heart stayed sincere enough. But sincerity does not always shorten the road. Sometimes it lengthens it. There are lessons that cannot be rushed without breaking what they are meant to build. There are truths that would collapse under explanation if they were given before you were ready to carry them. So you have been slowed, not punished, not forgotten, slowed. And slowing down has forced you to notice things you once outran, the patterns you repeat when afraid, the way you protect yourself with control, the subtle fear of hoping again and being disappointed twice. You did not lose faith. Your faith lost its illusions. That is not decay, that is refinement. I have been teaching you how to stand without leaning on outcomes, how to remain present without demanding reassurance every moment, how to trust without constantly checking whether trust is working. This kind of learning feels uncomfortable because it removes familiar anchors. You can no longer rely on momentum. You can no longer rely on excitement. You can no longer rely on certainty. You are learning reliance instead. Reliance does not feel powerful. It feels exposed. It feels like walking without knowing how firm the next step will be. But this is where depth is formed. We walk by faith, not by sight. 2 Corinthians 5:7. Sight demands evidence. Faith learns to breathe without it. You have been breathing through uncertainty longer than you think. Every day you rise without clarity. Every time you choose not to quit despite confusion. Every moment you remain open when closing would feel safer. These are movements of faith, even if they do not feel spiritual to you. You expected faith to feel like confidence. Instead, it has felt like endurance. You expected it to feel like answers. Instead, it has felt like restraint. But restraint has been protecting something fragile within you. There are parts of you that would have hardened if everything had come easily. There are parts of you that would have closed permanently if disappointment had not slowed you down long enough to be felt. I have watched you resist bitterness, not perfectly, but honestly. I have watched you wrestle instead of withdrawing. I have watched you choose reflection instead of blame. These choices are quiet. They do not announce themselves. They do not impress others, but they change you. You are becoming someone who can carry weight without letting it poison your spirit. Someone who can face unanswered questions without letting them turn into accusations. Someone who can stand in uncertainty without demanding immediate escape. This is not accidental. It is good that a man should both hope and quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. Lamentations 3:26. Quiet waiting reshapes the inner world. It loosens your grip on control. It teaches you the difference between urgency and importance. It reveals what you truly trust when reassurance is removed. You have discovered that some prayers change form. They move from requests to surrender, from words to posture, from urgency to endurance. And though you sometimes fear that this change means distance, it actually marks closeness of a different kind. You are learning to stay, to remain present when nothing resolves quickly, to inhabit the moment without rushing past it, to let meaning develop instead of forcing it. This season has not asked you to be impressive. It has asked that you be honest. It has not required answers. It has required availability. And you have been available, even on days when you felt empty, even when continuing felt mechanical, even when you wondered whether stillness meant stagnation. Stillness is not absence of movement. Sometimes it is the deepest form of preparation. Roots do not grow upward. They grow unseen, under pressure, in darkness, long before anything changes above the surface. And something in you has been taking root, slowly, quietly, without drawing attention, stretching downward while you wondered why nothing visible was happening yet, why progress felt invisible, why the road seemed to extend without offering markers or confirmation, why the only instruction you could sense was simply to remain, to breathe, to not abandon the process mid-formation, to accept that not every stage announces itself, that some transformations are only recognized later, after endurance has already done its work, after patience has softened resistance, after the need for immediate understanding has loosened its hold, and you are still here, still listening, still standing within the tension between what you once expected and what is actually unfolding, unaware that this very tension is shaping the capacity you will need for what comes next, for what cannot yet be held, for what would overwhelm you if it arrived too early. And so the movement continues beneath the surface, unhurried, intentional, unfinished. And there comes a moment, often unnoticed, when the weight you have been carrying no longer defines you. Not because it disappeared, but because it no longer owns your breath. You realize one day that you are still here, still open, still capable of tenderness, even after everything that tried to harden you. That realization does not arrive with excitement. It arrives with calm. You stop demanding that every season explain itself. You stop measuring your worth by visible outcomes. You stop asking whether you are enough, because the question itself begins to lose urgency. This is not resignation. This is rest. You begin to understand that being held does not always feel like being lifted. Sometimes it feels like being steadied so you do not collapse under the weight of becoming. You were never abandoned in the waiting. You were never ignored in the silence. You were never delayed out of neglect. What felt like distance was space. Space for growth you could not rush. Space for depth that required time. Space for a strength that would not be loud or brittle, but patient, grounded, and enduring. You no longer need to force the next step. It will come when it is time. You no longer need to fear the unanswered questions. They will soften or resolve or lose their power to wound.
For now, it is enough to breathe. It is enough to remain. It is enough to trust that what is unfinished is still being guided. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts. Colossians 3:15. Peace does not erase memory. It rearranges it. It places pain in context. It loosens fear's grip. It reminds you that you are not defined by the hardest parts of your journey. And so you stand here, not at the end, but at a place of quiet steadiness. No longer rushing forward, no longer collapsing backward, simply held. And now the Lord of peace himself give you peace always by all means. 2 Thessalonians 3:16. You do not need to prove anything tonight. You do not need to solve tomorrow. You do not need to carry what was never meant to be carried alone. Rest your thoughts. Set down the weight. Let the moment be what it is. You are seen. You are kept. And you are not walking this path by yourself. Amen.